Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes. In the last part, we finished off our business in the Mortavian prison lands, and now we're here at the Lost Isle, the final dungeon of the game. We got two enemies right off the bat: Razormans, which just hit you real hard, and Raiders, which do the same. I think they might have some elemental resistances? The final dungeon here is easily the longest dungeon in the game, and what makes it kind of unique is that it's kind of built out of several different mini-biomes. And we got two new enemies here, Drakfangs, which can use some cure magic outside of their normal attacks, and Centurions, which are beefy guys that you'll only be able to do real damage to with the Sword Blaze, if memory serves. But they also have a very punishing attack that is essentially Coma 4 and can instant kill a character. Thankfully, the Sword Blazes, if they get a critical hit, are probably going to one-hit kill the Centurions as well, but be careful of them. They're definitely the enemy you should fear the most in this first portion of the area. So like I mentioned and showed off last part, I recommend before coming in here, going to various towns across the world and getting some elixirs, some salts, some mage fruits, and some potions, because they're just going to be the best items to fill your inventory with. In fact, basically every chest in this final dungeon is one of those 4 items. Or maybe not even all 4, maybe it's just the elixirs, potions, and mage fruits now that I think about it. No salts around. In fact, I do technically waste every chest in here because my inventory is full. In fact, I showed off a moment ago. Between parts, I actually went back to one of the earlier game towns, I forget which one, and bought a torch because there is a portion here that is in a dark cave area, and I'd like to be able to see greater distances than the tiles directly around Logan when I'm in there. Now, if you were coming in here around like level 37 to 38, you're probably going to want to fight some of the battles just to be more ready for the final boss, let alone maybe getting close to a level towards the end of the dungeon for a free HP and MP restore on every character. But when you come in here in the early 40s, you can probably just avoid as many fights as you can and be completely fine. The only reason I'm fighting as many enemies as I can along the way, or at least trying to fight every enemy type, is to show them off in case you run into them. Because we do get numerous enemy sets in here that are dedicated to each of the little mini biomes. In fact, once we enter this door, we're done with the Lost Isle, and we are on to the Beast Maze. This is easily the most hard to navigate portion of the area, only because it's in the dark. And in here we got one of my least favorite enemies in the game, actually. I think this fight has them. Yes, the Swamp Snakes. These guys, I think, have some shock magic from memory? Yeah, shock 5, so that's about 500 damage per. But the thing that's annoying about these guys, on top of them also having venom, is that they have very high evade, but not just by having a high luck stat. More or less, you have like it's probably like a 33 to 50% chance of your weapon being gummed up by hitting them, and just no damage being done. And it's really annoying. I recommend fighting enemies in this portion of the final dungeon the least just because of that alone, really. Enemies in here drop a variety of items, by the way. Some extra potions, herbs, some nitros, which are real weird. The ones that might be the most useful are the warp coils, because since this is a dungeon, you can't use warp 2 to get out of here. You can only use warp 1 or warp coils, and those might be worth getting along the way, in case you want to ever leave for some reason. They didn't get to stick around too long there, but that there was a Sultan. They're kind of a caster type enemy. They have some high level ice magic, and one of the mute and sleep spells from memory, so if you got the calm spell around, which you should for the final boss, or one of the mute line spells around might be useful on them. What makes avoiding enemies at times kind of hard is that enemies, when they're in the field and they actually can just move, they don't really have an actual movement pattern in the dungeons. They just sort of run around. These are rag corpses. From my memory, these are one of the 2 enemies that can only be killed by the shock spell line, because I don't think fire or ice can work on them. And your physical attacks definitely have a very high chance of missing, if not guaranteed. With that said, they more or less die in 1 shock 5, so I'm not exactly sure if they have anything special about them. From memory, I think they just got some magic. Maybe they can confuse you. I do find the music in this dungeon interesting. It's actually kind of a nice haunting tune, but it starts off really slowly, and something that you can't exactly tell in most dungeons of the game, except for this one because of how slow the start is to it. Whenever you get into a random battle, the music restarts in dungeons, and that's annoying. But it's also because it was tied directly to a CD player, so I guess it makes sense for the PC Engine versions. This dungeon, though, doesn't have much in the way of a gimmick besides its size, which is a gimmick in itself, I suppose. And I do at least appreciate this game trying to do very minor things with its dungeons, playing around with them here and there, like the Giles-only exploration one. You got the no weapons armor allowed door in that one. They tried things, and that's more than I can say for at least the first two Final Fantasies, and more or less the first two Dragon Quests as well. This game is about on par quality of Final Fantasy III and Dragon Quest III in some regards, and I do appreciate that. Would I play some of those games before this? Probably. But I'd say it's about the same quality overall, with its own quality of life stuff that the other two are lacking. Something that's very interesting, though, about the music, going back to it, is let's listen right here to what sound effect is used in the music. I think I cut that out right here, right? That is just 100% the Taco Bell gong sound. Why is that in the music? I don't think they were using that back in, let's see, this song probably would have been composed originally in this particular instrument set in like 88, 89, but damn, that's just funny. Alright, so now we're in the next biome, the Labyrinth. You might have noticed, and right at the entrance, I walked in a square real quick. That's because we're going to be cutting back to the entrance eventually, because this pathway we're on right now doesn't lead to the end. But we got more new enemies here. These are Grim Reapers. These enemies are probably some of the most annoying in the dungeon. They are also only vulnerable to the shock spell line, but they can hit you with some attacks that confuse you. I think they can put you to sleep too from memory, and because of how much Shock 5 costs, I'm going to be running low on MP pretty quick here. And we also got their other partner here. These are the Vindicators, I believe. These guys don't got a lot of spells they can do, but they do hit hard and have some pretty tanky defense from memory. I'd recommend targeting the Grim Reapers first if you can, but if you have someone who's at no MP and you get this particular battle layout, send them at the Vindicator while whoever has the spells goes after the Grim Reapers. The Labyrinth portion of the final dungeon here definitely has the thinnest corridors, so you're probably going to be forced into more battles here than anywhere else. But it's not really too much of a labyrinth, because when I think of labyrinth, I think of like multiple four-way intersections that lead to various dead ends and only one real exit. And there is only one real exit, but at any point in time, you only have 2 route choices to take in this area. One of them always leads to a dead end, usually at least rewarding you with a treasure chest containing like a mage fruit, an elixir, or any of those 3 items. But the other way is always the right way to go. So I think in total nesting, and now we've jumped back to the start, I think there's like 4 pathways in here then total? It's not very confusing. If anything, the reason that I find this place to be kind of annoying is just for the Grim Reapers, because the other enemies you can fight in here aren't too bad. The Vindicators are always with the Grim Reaper, so it's kind of annoying for that. But the only other enemy variety I think that's in this section, we'll see in a few moments, isn't a lot to write home about. Oh, here they are actually. Demon Flies and the Queen Bees. Demon Flies don't got a lot going on, they're more or less just fodder. The Queen Bees, though, not so much. They got some pretty high attack, they can put you to sleep, and when they die, they explode. And that does pretty much just a pittance of damage, unless you get critically hit by it, I think, in which case it can do a lot. In that regard, you might want to run away from Queen Bees if you run into them, but the experience is worth it at the end of the day, in my eyes. With the amount of enemies in here, probably going to be guaranteed a level or 2 if you just fight a lot of them along the way anyway. Also, keep in mind where we came upstairs onto the floor we just left a moment ago, because we're going to be jumping back there again, because this is another dead end direction. The staircase that was immediately on screen when we came upstairs there is the way we actually need to go. I do kind of wish the enemies in here all had different field sprites so you can kind of tell what you're getting into instead of always looking like you're about to fight a Centurion. But I get why they don't do that. But otherwise, the game's been pretty good about giving a lot of enemies unique field sprites. Like, even the Crabbeaks had them for the one time you see one in the field in the dungeon where you fight the Garmaster. So it just kind of feels weird that they don't give a lot of them unique ones here. Or at least one, like a different one for every single tile set would be nice. Alright, but now we're back onto the real pathway, and from here I think it's just a straight shot to the final biome of this dungeon. Because there's, 4 of them. Technically 5 if you count the room the final boss is in for a reason we'll get into in a few minutes. Also, God, you got enough enemies? I'm not sure how this dungeon handles its enemy spawns, because by and large I think they spawn a set amount of enemies in other dungeons, but I'm not sure if they just, like, spawn random ones here, if it's like, alright, every time you go through a staircase, there are 10 enemies, you just need to get through them all, or something like that. I could see it being something like that, like always have 10 enemies when you enter a floor. I doubt it's that directly, though. And here we are into the final biome, the Abode. And we got 2 new enemies here, Tituses and Vikings. The Vikings are the ones on the edges, and they're kind of easy to kill, things considered, but you want to target the Tituses first, because they can revive the aforementioned Vikings from death. I'm not sure if you get more experience if they do that, I really doubt it, honestly. So target the Tituses first, just to prevent the battle from going on longer than it probably should. Otherwise, these enemies are just heavy physical fighters. Can do some serious damage, but at this point, you can do some serious damage to them as well. And here we got more new enemies, the Necromancers and the Pyroclaws, I think was the name of the other one? Necromancers look pretty easy there. They're not, because similarly to the Night Shields back at the tower, they can reflect your physical attacks back at you, and that can do some serious damage. So can the Pyroclaws with their lava attacks, so watch out for them. And the final new random enemy we're encountering in this LP is the Fire Knights. Decent physical attack, and their attacks are fire type, so if you have gem equipment on, it will break when they hit you. Not that I have much of that left, I think I only have a gem blade on Sonya, for reasons I'll talk about in a moment. The other thing these guys have is they can hide in the shadows for a few turns and then just attack you. And when they're in the shadows, they cannot be attacked. There's a couple of enemies in the game that have an ability like that, but theirs is easily the most annoying because they're the most likely to use it, I think. So something I'm not doing at this point in the LP is going back to other towns and talking to NPCs, and I recommend doing that if you like a lot of world building, because I do like how the dialogue changes so often in these games. But at this point, you're not really going to think to do that just because you'd have to go so far out of the way to even talk to people back in Sylvan. So I had a gem blade, as you may have saw, it got destroyed on Sonya. I had one on her, if only because she's not going to be doing a lot of physical attacking during the final bosses. She's mostly going to be focused on using spells to start, and then she's going to be my item user to keep everyone healed up, because we are going to be using Calm, so we're not going to have Cure Magic accessible during the final bosses. It can be a little rough. But we're getting close to the end here. Once we're through this door right here, we're coming up on the first 2 of the 2 final bosses. I could recommend saving here, because you can save anywhere, as I brought up before. And make sure you save on a different slot, though, if you saved right outside the dungeon, in case you not quite reach a dead game level state, but in the case you're not confident, I guess is the way I want to phrase it. Naja? But isn't he supposed to be a blue dragon? Naja's definitely a dangerous fight. He's got some pretty high-level magic, including Waste, which will absorb HP into his own at about 500 at a time. He's got a party-wide fire attack that can do about 1,000 damage, and he can prevent you from physically attacking him if you choose to, randomly by causing a hurricane wind force, essentially. Our strategy here is to lower his defense as much as we can. I'd recommend at least 2 to 3 Leech 4s, maybe a Power 4 or a Slow 4 if you got him, to just make this fight a little quicker, and then use Calm to just prevent him from using any of his spells and recovering his HP. You can, I believe, hit both of the final bosses with Mute 3 if you got it. I just prefer Calm because it's a guaranteed success, because Mute 3 at most, I think, is like a 66% chance of succeeding. Something like that. And he's dead. That lowered defense, pretty brutal. Is the quest over? If you have to ask, the answer's probably no, game. It's kind of rude to just say that. Decent experience, though. Ooh, and Sonya gained a level. That's good, because she's going to need the MP. At this point, by the way, I've been putting all my bonus points into speed and luck in this dungeon. I hope you're not celebrating your victory over my double. I do trust that you're not foolish enough to believe you've defeated me. Judging by the trouble you've had with my twin, I should hope that you see the wisdom in a hasty and permanent retreat. If not, you are more reckless than I thought. Yeah, we're not done yet. Naja is a blue dragon. That was just a double, and I think you can completely ignore that boss fight. because Naja himself is just over here to the right slightly. But you do need to have the sword blaze to get through this to the final door. In fact, that's why I said there's technically 5 areas, because you might count this sword blaze as a final biome change. I don't really myself, but I can see people counting that. And I recommend saving because we're at the end game. Almost 17 hours in.
At last we meet. I never dreamed I would see the day when I'd be confronted by humans. Know you that I be as old as time itself? That you're not the first civilization to be crushed by my hands? I thought not. It was an error on my part not to have totally annihilated mankind when I had the chance. I shall not make the same mistake again. Once I eliminate you and obtain the jewels of doom, civilization as you know it will no longer exist.
But why destroy us?
Because you are what you are.
And what do you mean by that?
It's best that you do not know. That way, you'll rest easier in your graves.
Naja the Indestructible, and that is kind of literal, because the Sword Blaze is the only thing that's going to be doing good damage here physically unless the other 2 people get a critical hit with their physical attacks. And main Naja here has more or less the same moveset as the fake one, only he's also got Coma 4, so he can just randomly instant kill someone. Thank God I still have the revive spell around. You can also use elixirs for this as well. Our main strategy here is more or less the same as the clone, though. You're going to want to get Leech 4 going at least once to twice, Power 4 Giles up if you're using him as your main attacker like I am, and then use Calm to prevent him from using Coma 4. At that point, that's where we want to use the Rabbit Feat I've been saving since Sordus, basically, because that can boost Giles's and Ethan's luck, making hits and critical hits more likely against the boss fight. If you've leached his defense and you're using the Sword Blaze, as you'll see, he does die pretty quickly, because 8,000 HP isn't even a lot by this game's standards, given what some of the other boss fights have had, let alone some of the random enemies have had like 2,000. But he can bring their hurt pretty quickly if you're not prepared. Hardest fight in the game? No, I'd say technically the commanders back in the first area were technically harder for the point in the game they were at. But he is definitely still dangerous. Since we've used Calm, you're going to want to use your potions, or if let someone die intentionally, to use an elixir to get them back up to full health more quickly. The Sponge can be useful here, I guess, if you wanted to try to sap away his MP and prevent him from using Coma 4 that way, but not exactly a reliable strategy. He can be hard, he can hurt, but if you've gotten this far, you're probably going to do just fine, honestly. Especially if you do almost all of his HP in a single blow! And that's game.
Mankind has always been the poison. For it is man that destroys nature as he multiplies in number. I, on the other hand, am the antidote. It was nature that created me to maintain her delicate balance. When I first brought civilization to its knees, I felt an overwhelming sorrow for what I'd done. In my anguish, I cast the jewels of doom to the far corners of Isanasa, so that I would never repeat the deed again. But when I saw mankind once again becoming a threat to nature, I decided it was time to put an end to everything once and for all. However, it would seem that a power much greater than mine has decided that mankind must live. I can only bow to that decision.
What's eating you, Your Highness?
Did we really do the right thing? I can't shake the feeling that nausea was nature's last defense against man. By defeating nausea, we may have sealed the fate of nature.
Has that been a risk of the game thus far? They haven't really talked about that in the US script, at least.
But you mustn't forget that Naja yielded to what he claimed was a higher decision. If that is the case, then I think it is safe to assume that the powers that be have left it in our hands to maintain nature's balance.
Maybe this time, nature used nausea to warn us.
Yeah, now all we gotta do is live and let live.
I hate to admit it, but I think our streetwise friend has singled out an ideal solution.
Live and let live. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Hey, you're making me blush.
Well, that ending takes a turn into being an Aesop, huh? From my knowledge, a lot of what this game didn't touch on, there was a lot it didn't touch on just from how many concepts they brought up but did nothing with. They were gone into in the sequel, because I think Falcom likes to write games to be duologies, or at the least writes a game and then just kind of splits it in half, because they did that with Trails in the Sky is that, I think Trails from Zero is that from my knowledge, and Cold Steel 1 and 2 are meant to be that as well. Either way, that's Dragon Slayer Legend of Heroes. It's fine. I think there's a lot of interesting parts to it that are more interesting than its contemporaries at the time, like the original Final Fantasies or the original Dragon Quests. But I think those are ultimately more playable because they're just more interesting mechanically. This game's got some cool ideas, it's got some nice characters, and honestly there's more to the characters here than there are in some of the early Dragon Quests or Final Fantasies even. But the main combat is just very brain dead. You hit things hard, you use Cure Magic, and that's about it, because the other spells just aren't as useful. But you can definitely see the seeds of what this franchise would become in what we have here. Between the NPC dialogue constantly changing, between characters from the past showing up again as their own separate party, between a lot of concepts showing up, meaning that they definitely thought the world's lore out in some regard. There's some interesting stuff here, but it's just not an interesting game mechanically. From what I know, there's an OVA of this that I need to check out at some point, apparently, because it's got some kind of cool animation stuff there. And if they ever get, if the sequel to this ever gets a fan translation or an official one, I will do it. But after this, we didn't get another Legend of Heroes game until the PSP remakes of the Gargev trilogy, and even then, we got those completely out of order. And I'm not going to do those until I've played them more in depth and I know more about them, and I'm probably going to play them in their actual 3, 4, 5 order rather than I think what we got was 4, 3, 5. So the next time we see Legend of Heroes on the channel, we're going to jump straight to the 6th game, which starts off the Trails saga that is still ongoing to this day. It's definitely worth a look if you're into the series, and if you like some older RPGs just in terms of like experimentation and trying new experiences, I think it's worth a shot. And for the time it came out in Japan back in 87 or 88, this is really high tier stuff, but if you're looking for a very engaging game, look at games that came out closer to its US release in 92. Because like Final Fantasy V came out that same year, I think A Link to the Past did. Final Fantasy IV was the year prior. There are games that I think are more worth your time if you're looking for something quick but interesting to play. The best thing about it overall? The soundtrack. This music's great. Even if hearing the start of the battle theme in this game almost rivals hearing the start of the battle theme in Sonic Unleashed in terms of repetition. If you want to play it, there are plenty of versions of it, just only the TurboGrafx-PC Engine version got localized in English. Because it was on like the PC 8801, the 9801, the MSX, TurboGrafx, Super Nintendo, the Sharp X68000, the Genesis PC. PlayStation and Sega Saturn both got remakes of this with Dragon Slayer 2 added on a bundle. But as far as I can even know, I think only this version has a direct translation, unless they just applied the English text from this to other versions. I might tackle some of the earlier Dragon Slayer games we got in the States at some point, but those are also clunky in their own regards. I definitely gotta start tackling Ys at some point as well. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.